Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. I'm really happy to have you here with me in the kitchen. We are going to be getting up to some fun stuff today. At least I think it's fun. Hopefully you do too. We are going to make some Italian sausage using this trim pork that we got all ready for the grinder yesterday. I made a huge batch of breakfast sausage yesterday as well, and we're going to be forming all of that into patties. But I thought it might be interesting to take you through the whole process from beginning to end of actually making some sausages. This meat has been all cleaned up and trimmed, so everything has been removed from it that we wouldn't want to have in our sausage. So all this is meat and fat. We have 2 bowls of it here. So this is our other one. You can see, we're gonna bring that over to our grinder. This lamb grinder is perfectly sufficient for grinding smaller batches of meat like this. I do have a larger commercial grinder that I use when I'm doing large batches, especially when I'm doing beef. This is all of the pork that we did yesterday. So I've already seasoned this, and I used Todd's recipe from that 1870s homestead for the breakfast sausage. I'll put a link to that down in the show notes for you. As you can see, this is not a fine ground sausage. I prefer my sausage to have a little bit of texture to it. It has been run through the grinder twice, so there's nothing, really chunky in there. I like to allow my sausage to sit for 24 hours before I freeze it, just so that all the flavors of all the herbs and the spices can mingle. I'm just gonna sit that back over here. The sausage that I just showed you is slightly frozen because it was left outside overnight. I didn't have enough space in my refrigerator. So I'm gonna let it sit there for a little bit so it can warm up so my hands don't freeze when I'm making the patties. Not warm up enough to develop bacteria, of course, but warm enough so my hands don't freeze. Once we have all of this sausage ground, we are going to make a puff pastry. So in I don't think it was my last video, but a couple of videos ago, I made something called almond puff, and I didn't have enough eggs for the recipe, and it totally failed. The flavor was good, but it didn't puff up at all. So I made another batch of it yesterday, and I got it to work using, of course, the correct amount of eggs. And today I want to try doing something a little bit different. I'm going to add some cream cheese and a little bit of raspberry jam to it to make kind of like a raspberry creamy puff tart. All right, let's get into some grinding. My dad was a butcher, and he always taught me that for the perfect grind for both sausage and for ground beef is to do 3 pieces of lean beef to a piece of fat. So I always do that, and it always turns out really well. We're gonna stick some meat up here and some fat. And with a grinder, especially a small grinder like this, you shouldn't really need to use this to force the meat through. If the pieces are correctly sized, so nice and small like this so that they fit through really nicely, the actual auger itself in here should propel the meat through. You can use this to kind of give it a little bit of encouragement to go through. You don't want to be shoving it down because it does end up putting a lot of stress on the motor of your machine. Also, it does start to cause a little bit of heat, like friction and stuff going on in here, which can make your fat really mushy. And it's always a good idea, of course, when you're working with meat to keep everything nice and cold. This meat is quite well chilled. We left it outside overnight, so it's not frozen, but it is cold enough that it's not going to have any issues with bacteria growth or with causing issues with it going through the grinder. That was a lot of work for this little machine. This is quite a lot of sausage, so I'm going to divide this in half, run half of it through the grinder again on a finer setting, and that will be for ground pork, just plain ground pork. And then the rest of it I'm going to season up for Italian seasoning or Italian sausage. One of the things that I like to do with my seasonings is to make sure that they're not like powder, but that they're pretty fine. So I have blended up my parsley because my parsley was looking like this, and also some rosemary as well, just so that we don't have chunks in our sausages. If I was going to be leaving that to sit for any more than 10 minutes, I would actually wash it and sterilize it first. But since we're going to use it again right away, I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm going to take out half of this meat. Most of the sausage recipes that you're going to find online will be written for 1 pound of meat. So it is important that you weigh. Normally I don't weigh, as you know, but in this case, I want the seasonings to be perfect. So that is around half. So this I'm just going to wrap up as just plain ground, and then we'll season all this up. This is close to 10 pounds. So I'm going to do the recipe according to that. Let's get a measuring spoon. This recipe is from a website called Spend with Pennies, and I'll make sure that I link that for you. This isn't quite as finely ground as I was hoping for. You can see there's still the sticks of the rosemary in there a little bit, but I am going to be running this through the grinder again. That's one of the benefits of putting your seasonings in before you do your second grind, so it mixes it all together and crushes everything up really well. Oh, excuse me for 1 sec. Okay, because I'd already pre-mixed this in my blender, I knew approximately how much I had. I'm not worried about exact measurements. I just want to make sure I have enough so it's flavorful. But for the rest of the seasonings, I'm actually going to be mixing them into a separate bowl, just in case I lose count. This calls for fennel, but nobody in my house likes fennel, so we're gonna skip that. Some black pepper, a little bit of thyme, and some red pepper flakes. Add all our seasonings in there. And then give this a good mix. I've also done bacon, which I have sitting in the fridge. I'll show you that in a second. And hams, which are sitting in the brine down in the shop. It's slightly above freezing, but cold enough so that nothing goes bad. So those will sit in the brine, at least the bacons will, until tomorrow, and then I'll smoke them. And I'll show you guys that as well. Smoked bacon, smoked homemade bacon is just so delicious. And then my hams are pretty big, so I'm gonna give them, I think, 5 days in the brine before I take them out and do them. So I'm giving this a really good mix. And then while it's still nice and cold, we'll run it through the grinder again. I'm going to wrap up or cover this sausage, so the Italian sausage, and this is going to go outside. And whenever I put stuff outside, people always ask me whether I'm worried about animals getting it. I actually put it inside my barbecue outside so that nothing can get it, unless I'm only putting it out there for a few minutes and then I just stick it on the freezer. But cover that up, and then we will get these made into patties tomorrow. Neither Dan or I like sausage casings, so I always just make patties. And the Italian sausage, usually, even if I buy it from the store in the casings, I take it out of the casings for most of the recipes that I use Italian sausage for. Okay, I'm just going to wrap up, sorry, we have the shop vac going downstairs, the rest of this plain stuff, and then we will do the breakfast sausage that I made yesterday, and I'm gonna make that into patties, and I'll show you how I package that up. Okay, I will give you a little demonstration of how I wrap my meat. So I have a square piece of paper, roughly square, and I'm going to take roughly a pound of ground pork, and I'm going to put it just below the middle of my paper here. Take the side or the pointy part, grab it, put my hand here, pull down a little bit just to make it nice and snug. Take the side, and fold it over similarly to the way you do a present. So if you have a little end sticking off there, just fold that in, just because it'll make it look tidier. And squeeze as you go towards the top of your package, just so you have as little air in that package as possible. I am using some really terrible painter's tape that rips paint off the walls, but actually works really well for freezer tape, like so. I'm going to take a pause on the pork for right now because that pork is a little bit too cold for my hands at the moment, and I am going to make the almond puff. So what I've decided to do, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, is I'm going to make the almond puff just the basic recipe, but I am going to add cream cheese and raspberry jam as a layer on the inside of it because I think that that would be delicious. I was thinking initially that I would add a little bit of powdered sugar to the cream cheese, but I've decided now that because the strawberry jam I'm using a store-bought, or sorry, not strawberry jam, raspberry jam, is so sweet that I am not going to add any extra sugar. And there is not any sugar in this recipe outside of the, I need some scissors, outside of the frosting. So we'll keep the sugar level low by just adding a little bit of the jam and not adding extra sugar anywhere else in the recipe. First up, half a cup of butter, 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Okay, all I've done here is I've mixed my butter and my flour together. So it is kind of like coarse oatmeal. And then into this, I'm going to put a couple of tablespoons of nice cold water. So basically I'm just making a simple pastry. So we're just going to mix this together until it forms a dough. I find that this is easiest to do on a flat pan that doesn't have a rim around it, because then you can actually use your rolling pin right on it. You can push this down with your fingers too. You don't need to use a rolling pin for it if you don't want to. So I'm going to spread a little bit of cream cheese onto each one, but I'm not going to put it around the edges because I want the choux pastry, and I think that's how you say it, that I'm going to make that it's going to go on the top to be able to seal around the edges so that all the cream cheese and the jam doesn't come out of it. Now, into this pot, we're going to add another half a cup of butter and 1 cup of water. We're going to bring this to a boil. Once our water is boiling, we add 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and we're steaming out the camera. Like so, and then into this, 1 teaspoon almond extract and 3 eggs. Like so. Okay, so the goal with this is to get this to seal around the edge so my filling doesn't come out, and also so from the pastry from the top doesn't separate from the pastry at the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to bake this at 350 for up to an hour, or until it's nice and golden brown on top. Now we will get on to making some patties. And I've enlisted a little bit of help behind the scenes here with the patty making because there is a lot of meat to do. It's very cold. That's a good thing from the perspective of bacterial growth, not such a good thing when it comes to our hands, hey? So just form a patty in whatever way and whatever size you like. So I'm gonna do some packages with just 4 in them. So that way if there's just a couple of people that wanna make just a few, we don't have to thaw out a large pack, but I'll also make a couple of 8-pack ones so that we can pull out a couple of those when we're going to make a big breakfast with everyone. Okay, so we're gonna get on getting these done, and then when it comes to packaging up, I'll show you how I do that. It's pretty much the same way that I do the ground meat, only when I'm wrapping it, I'm just careful not to kind of deform the shape of the patty so I don't pull it the way that I do with the ground meat. I'm going to cut some squares, and we'll use these to divide the patties so that they don't stick together when they're in the freezer. You don't have to do this if you're really good about making sure that you defrost your meat first. This isn't necessary, but rarely ever does that happen in my house. Okay, so I'm gonna get the rest of these wrapped up, and we're going to pause and have some lunch, and we'll be back with you again this afternoon. I'll show you the puff pastry, hopefully it works, and then we'll also do some planting down in the grow room. I had to jump back on and turn the camera back on again before I was ready to start this afternoon stuff because I wanted to show you what the almond puff looks like when it comes out of the oven because it's so puffy and it looks so beautiful. So let me grab it. We decided to have sausage and egg wraps. So we're gonna be able to try the breakfast sausage out. So I have that frying on the stove. Look at how puffy that is. I don't know if you can really tell, but can you see how puffy it is? It did separate a little bit there, but it still looks delicious, smells good. And now I'm just gonna let that cool right down before I put the glaze on it, but we'll try it this afternoon after lunch. We are back at it, had a lovely rest, and now I'm going to make some glaze, some almond glaze for these and cut into them and see how they look. They sure smell good, and they definitely poofed up nicely. I was really happy with that sausage. That tasted really good. The sausage was fantastic, by the way. Really, really tasty. And I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I hope that the Italian sausage is just as good. So all I'm doing here is adding a little bit of almond extract to some icing sugar, a little splash of milk. Okay, there we go. Some glaze. Okay, here's what it looks like on the inside. So when I did it and didn't have the cream cheese and the jam filling, this part of the pastry was actually stuck. I'll show you a little bit closer. Attached to this part, so it, whoops, dripping frosting everywhere. So it looked, I don't know, it looked a little bit tidier than this. That is very yummy. I definitely think that I could have put more cream cheese on and maybe a little bit more jam just so that it had a little bit more of that kind of flavor to it, but it is really, really good. And it looks pretty. Are you a tea or a coffee drinker or no caffeine? I have gone kind of back and forth. I haven't had coffee in years and years and years. I used to be a coffee drinker many moons ago, but not in a very long time. I drink Earl Grey tea now, and I usually have a mug like that size, which is, my daughter calls it my small flower pot mug in the morning, at least one in the morning and then one in the afternoon. And I am pushing 2 today, 2 in the afternoon today, because I am feeling a little tired. Over the last few weeks, I'm not sure why this happened, I started to get back into sleeping in a little bit later. Normally I like to get up around 5:30 in the morning, and I pushed it back to 7, and it really does make a big difference on how much work I can get done in a day, and even actually the amount of relaxing time I have in the day, because I get up before my kids, so I have an opportunity to have a little bit of alone time. But I started doing it again a couple of days ago, and I'm feeling a little bit tired, just a little. When I mentioned that I was out of baking powder, I don't know when this was, a couple weeks ago, and that I had forgotten to do it with my Horizon Distributors order, which is the BC place that I order a lot of my bulk goods from. One of you mentioned Organic Matters, and I don't know why I completely forgot about Organic Matters and being able to buy things like cornstarch. So this is organic cornstarch, baking soda, baking powder, and cream of tartar, because I was also out of cream of tartar. So I am going to be able to stock up all of my jars. I got these jars from the Bulk Barn. Do you have the Bulk Barn in the United States, or is that a Canadian thing? Anyway, I got these from the Bulk Barn, and I need to go get another one so that I can put my cornstarch in there. That is a humongous bag of cornstarch. Corn's one of those things that I like to buy organic when I can. Whew, a little dusty. That was the perfect size container for that bag. That's awesome. It's a lot more in that little bag than it looked like. I've had a website for a long time, but it was one that I put together, and I'm not a website designer by any stretch of the imagination. So I hired a woman, her name's Dee, from the Porter Homestead, and I will put a link for her down in the show notes in case you have a website that you need designed. She's also helping me with my cookbook too. So anyways, pardon me, honey? Anyway, I wanted to show you my new website, and of course I'll put a link for it down in the show notes too. I'm so happy with the way that it turned out. Coolest thing about this website, well, there's two things. Number one is I have a store on it, and that's where I'm going to be selling my cookbook and any other ebooks I do or products my kids make or anything like that. I have the shop in here, and this is where you'll be able to find all of the merchandise that we have created. I'm really excited about them. My niece has been helping me to design some beautiful logos for the shirts. And in this store will also be where I will have my cookbook listed and any other ebooks that I make in the future, along with any products that my kids make and want to sell. So I'm really excited about this feature. I also have a blog. These posts are more specific to specific questions that you guys have asked me, like how to grow garlic, how to deal with cabbage moths. And then this post is one that I just did, and it is my 2023 seed order. And I've made all of the links clickable so that you can just click on them, and then it'll bring you right to the page with the specific seed and all the information on it. I decided to do a bi-weekly newsletter rather than a weekly newsletter because I didn't want to inundate your inbox with content, but I really hope that these newsletters can be helpful, and hopefully you'll find some good information there. I also will try to share recipes that I've talked about during the previous 2 weeks on my channel. I just kind of want to make all of these different things that I'm doing work together so that I can be as helpful to you guys as possible. So through the blog, through the newsletter, through any ebooks or cookbooks or anything that I do, along with the regular content that I post here on YouTube. So I will, like I said, I'll put a link for the newsletter and for the website in the pinned comment, and then also in the show notes for you. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm really happy with the way that it turned out, and Dee did an absolutely amazing job. Okay, let's head down to the grow room and go start some seeds. Remember when I was potting up my tomatoes the other day? Speaking of tomatoes, look at how beautiful that little tomato plant is looking. Look at this one. So big and beautiful looking. Oh, makes me really happy. Anyway, when I was planting up or potting up my tomatoes, so that's taking them from smaller pots and putting them in slightly larger pots, there were a couple of extras. And so I just put them in the dirt over here. I just like leaned them up there. And then I forgot about them. I came in here yesterday morning And I don't know why I didn't notice this before, because this was probably just about a week ago now. But look at this. The tomatoes sent down their roots into the pot of soil that I have here, and they are happily growing away. And now I just don't have the heart to throw them away. So I'm gonna throw them in a pot. One of my least favorite things about gardening is when I have to thin and I have to choose the strongest seedling and then compost the rest. So I am going to do some microgreens today. You really don't need a ton of soil for doing microgreens at all. Just an inch is sufficient. I'm going to experiment with these ones. This is crimson lentils. Really liked the peas. I don't have any more peas, and I haven't been to the grocery store yet because that's what I want to do, is try some dried peas from the grocery store, because a couple of you mentioned that those worked really well for sprouts. So anyways, I haven't made it to the grocery store yet to do that experiment, but I really liked those. And I also want to try sunflowers, because I've heard good things about them as well. So just like I did with the peas last time, I am not going to bury these seeds. I'm just going to put them like so and give them a soaking. My goal at this point is I want to be starting a new tray approximately every 3 days or so. I'll show you the 2 trays that I have going right now. Take my next tray and stick it right on top of there. I really would like to get some more of these thin trays here. These are specifically for doing microgreens. But right now I only have a couple, and they are all used at the moment. Do some alfalfa. And because these seeds are pretty small, I'm going to put on my sprayer end onto here so I don't blow all those little seeds away. So I'll stick those on the shelf, and I'll leave them for 3 days, and then I'll take those off once they start to germinate, and then within not too long they'll look like this. So these are lettuces, just beautiful. And this is so exciting, but these are the greens that I planted, I don't know, when was that, 3 weeks ago now, something like that. This one is a mesclun mix, and as you can see, the seeds that I put in this section did not germinate, and I was going to reseed it and I never did. We are going to make our salad for dinner out of this tonight. Isn't that exciting? So that one's gonna come up with us. Amazing how much these beautiful little tomatoes have grown. So most of these are micro dwarf tomatoes, and you can actually see these ones are already starting to branch. Generally with standard size tomato plants, you would start to pinch off all these little side shoots, but you don't do that with micro dwarf bush style tomatoes. Something that I learned the other day, and this was also thanks to one of you, because you guys are amazing. You see all these tiny little hairs on the stem of this tomato plant? I always thought that these little hairs, and this is a common misconception, that all of these little hairs, if they come in contact with the soil, will form a root, but that is not actually true. The little tiny white bumps that you can see on there, I don't know if you can see them because they're pretty small, they're much more pronounced in a more mature plant, but those will form roots if they come in contact with the soil. These little hairs on here, their purpose is actually more to do with regulating the temperature of the plant than anything else. There's a lot more science involved in it, of course, but that was something I honestly, in all the years I've been gardening, I did not know. So thank you to whoever it was that shared that information with me, because I have been saying that on my videos forever, and I had been gardening forever, and I just didn't know, so now I do. If you're interested in some of the more detailed science behind these little tiny hairs on here, I'll link a great article down in the show notes for you. And it was actually written by a fellow Canadian as well. I need to grab a couple more containers for these few extra little tomatoes here, but I think first we're gonna run up and get the pork all ready and prepped and get it into the oven because it is already 3:30. Beautiful greens we're gonna set to the side, and we will make our salad with that. But first, let's get our pork out. Gorgeous pork ribs. I'll show you how I cure my bacons too. So this is a pound of bacon, a little over a pound of bacon, and in here I have half salt and half brown sugar and a little bit of black pepper. And what I do is I put it in a Ziploc bag like this, and then for 3 days I turn it over whenever I think about it, like so that the cure can get evenly distributed all the way through the bacon. All of this liquid that you can see down here, this is all liquid that has been extracted from this meat. It's starting to get nice and firm, which is what I'm looking for. When it comes to the smoking, I will bring you along for that, because that's always fun. Okay, so I've just cut these ribs like that. I haven't divided them yet, so I'm going to do that right now so that we can get as much of the barbecue sauce on all sides of these ribs as we can get. My dad was a butcher, and he taught me some basics of meat cutting. I worked in his butcher shop when I was a teenager, and then just before he died, not long before he died, he did a pig for us and showed me some of the things that I needed to know. All cut up. Now I'm going to sear them. Okay, our first tray is nice and seared and ready to go in the oven. So I've just salted this, and I'm going to cover this with tin foil and roast it in the oven until the meat is thoroughly cooked all the way through. And I know a lot of people cook ribs in the Instant Pot, but my Instant Pot is not big enough for the quantity that we need. One of my daughters wants to do the pizzas, so we are going to, what kind of pizza are you doing? Naples pizza? Is that what it was? Yeah, so I don't know. I have not seen this recipe before. This is a recipe that she found, so we'll see how it goes. You want to gather your ingredients, honey? Yeah. Okay, go for it. Let me show you all this beautiful food. So we have a bowl of salad with the greens from the grow room. We have these two beautiful pizzas, and these are made in the Italian style that my daughter made. Gorgeous and smell amazing. And then we have the pork ribs over here, which I ended up cooking for just about 2 hours. So we are having supper very late tonight, but they smell delicious. All right, my friends, that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.